Well, welcome everybody. My name is Dr. George Sparks. I'm the host of Bible Interact, Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. We have a very interesting guest. I'm excited to have her on our program today. Her name is Frankie Snyder. Let me give her a quick introduction. Frankie Snyder is an independent researcher who lived in Jerusalem. She has a BS in math from Virginia Tech and a Master's of Arts in Jewish Studies from Hebrew College in Boston. She has volunteered with ABR, the Associates of Biblical Research, since 2008 at archaeological sites as Herbert L. MacArthur and also Shiloh. She's an expert in tiles such as opus sectili tiles, if I pronounced that right, which are her specialties. Her almost 13 years of archaeological wet sifting experience has given her a variety of different experiences throughout the city of David in her wet sifting, ranging in all different identification of small finds. Welcome to the program, Frankie Snyder.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me here.
Let's see. I don't want to give it away, except the sign behind me says Mount Ebal Curse Tablet. Is that like the neon sign of the topic today?
When people ask me, what is your one best find? My answer is now the Mount Ebal Curse Tablet.
Usually in programs, when it's on YouTube and it's Mount Ebal, on the program is going to be Dr. Scott Stripling. I know that Dr. Stripling, in your last email, gave us permission to use some of the slides that we're going to use and insert later on. So I'm grateful for that, but also I'm going to say, Scott, this program is not about you. Sorry. This is going to be about Frankie Snyder and how she got involved, got talked into going to Mount Ebal to the location of Joshua's altar, where they wet sifted through an existing pile of debris left over from the 1980 excavation of Dr. Adam Zertel. Did I get that correct?
Yes, you did.
So far, so good. Okay, Frankie, I'm going to let you go and you tell us about your adventure.
I had worked with the Associates for Biblical Research, we'll call it ABR from here on, beginning in 2008 was when I first met the group. They had come to Jerusalem and worked with us at the sifting project when we were then sifting the material from the Temple Mount. ABR wanted some of their volunteers to learn what wet sifting was about because they anticipated using that technique in later excavations. Beginning in 2009, they returned to Khirbet Makatir, and I worked with them part-time at Makatir until 2016. And we did not do wet sifting at that site because there was no ready access to water. Beginning in 2017, ABR moved over to Tel Shiloh. At that location, there were agricultural fields right below the Tel, and so they were able to run a water line from the agricultural fields up to the Tel, and we were able to wet sift our material as well as dry sift it. Let me explain what those two things are. When you're working on an excavation, in order to find little things, you take the dirt that you have dug out from the ground and you put it on a tray. It's a wooden tray, usually about a little over 2 feet square. It has a metal mesh on the bottom. You dump a bucket of dirt on, shake it out. All the powdery dirt falls to the bottom. And on the top, you're left with rocks and pebbles and small artifacts, pottery shards, pieces of flint tools, maybe coins and beads. And you can find items in there. But because these items are still covered with dirt, it is very hard to recognize some of the smaller pieces. So then there's a second stage called wet sifting. We take this material, transfer it to a smaller tray that has a plastic mesh on the bottom with smaller holes. We take a good old garden hose, spray everything off, and now that the material is clean, you can see everything that's in there. So many more things are recognizable, particularly small things that are glyptic materials, meaning things that have writing on them, such as scarabs and bullae. A bulla is a small wad of clay that has been stamped with a stamped with a seal. So on this piece of clay is someone's name or someone's image or different figures that helps you identify this piece of clay as being a document seal that belonged to a particular historical person. While we were working at Tel Shiloh, we not only sifted our material from our active dig starting in 2017, but we were also sifting through material in 2 dump piles. One of the dumps was the material left over from Danish excavations from the 1920s and 1930s, and I think they also had one season in the 1960s. The other dump pile was left from excavations done by Israel Finkelstein and the group from Bar Ilan University from excavations in the 1980s. And we decided to do an experiment. Not we so much, but Scott Stripling decided we were going to do an experiment. We were going to go back to these 2 different dump piles, sift through them, and see if there was significant material that they had left behind simply because they did not have access to wet sifting or the ability to do wet sifting. So as we sifted material, both from the Danish dump and from the Bar Ilan dump, we began to find all different kind of artifacts that they missed, not because they weren't being good at their job. It's just they didn't have the technology at the time. They didn't have the access to water to wash everything off. And particularly, we were finding a lot of this glyptic material, the scarabs and the bullae. And it turned out that when we compared what we were finding with what they had published, for every one object that they published, we found 4 more, which means they had left behind a lot of material, not because they weren't good at their job. It was because they didn't have the ability to wash all that material off and look for it. So knowing this, I remember that Herschel Shanks, the editor of Biblical Archaeology Review, wrote an article about we should go back to Megiddo and totally sift all the dumps of Megiddo because we probably missed a lot of stuff there. And he was a proponent of using this wet sifting operation. When Professor Gabi Barkai and Zaki Devera started the Temple Mount sifting project, they began using this method of not only dry sifting material, but also wet sifting. And they found so many artifacts that otherwise would have been missed there. And that's a group that I worked with for 13 years while I was there in Jerusalem. So when Scott was when he was starting his project at Tel Shiloh, he asked me if I would work with them there, because at the time I was one of the most experienced wet sifters in the country. He asked me to come to Tel Shiloh, work with his group, teach his group how to do this, and work with them in identifying artifacts. During the year of 2019, during our dig that year, we had been doing this, sifting the Tel Shiloh material plus Bar Ilan and the Danish material. The very last day of the dig, a friend of the group, the name was Aaron Lipkin, came out to visit the site. Now, Aaron Lipkin had actually worked with Adam Zertal doing the Manasseh Hill Country survey, and he was very familiar with Zertal's dig at Mount Ebal. And we had, as a group, we had actually gone up to visit Mount Ebal, and we saw where the altar was, or what Zertal believed to be the altars up there on Mount Ebal. And Scott Stripling and Aaron Lipkin were having this conversation about, hey, I wonder if we can get permission from the Antiquities Authority to go back to Mount Ebal and sift through the material in the discard dumps from Adam Zertal's dig. In order to do this, you need a license from the Antiquities Authority. So Scott wrote a proposal to the Antiquities Authority. In this case, it was Kamat. It's letters Kamat. They are the agency that serves as the Antiquities Authority for Judea and Samaria. He wrote to them and said, here's our proposal. We want to go to Mount Ebal. We want to take this material that is in the dump, specifically the east dump. There's 3 different dumps, but it was specifically the east dump. Take it to a site where we can wet sift it and simply wet sift this material. He specifically told them, we are not going to dig any more holes in the ground. We're not doing any excavations that were not there before. We're simply taking the material from the dump piles and wet sifting it. and Kamat granted him a license. Now, many people have said, oh, these guys didn't even have a license when they went there. No. The first thing we had to do was get a license. Now, in order to sift the material, there was no water accessibility there on Mount Ebal. So Aaron Lipkin had a bunch of volunteers. They went up to Mount Ebal and they dug out the material from the dumps, put them in large bags. These are the industrial bags. It's called a bala. It's about 1 cubic meter or 1 cubic yard. They loaded these bags onto a truck and they took them over to a nearby Jewish village. And this is where we were going to work on the material. So this is how we got the material, totally licensed to do it. They had put in this request after the dig in the summer of May and June of 2019. And so by December of 2019, we had gotten the material. It had been bagged up and taken over to this Jewish village. And this is where we began to work with this material. That's a short version of a very long story.
You showed me pictures of the military soldiers up around that area. I tried to get in years ago. My first attempt, I was turned around because
you didn't have permission.
I had a guide with me. He told me the situation that we might be able to get in. It just depends on the soldiers, their mood, the atmosphere at that particular time. And there was those concrete blockades you had to go through. So, and then they had their military equipment. So you could tell that it was a touchy zone, if I could put it that way.
Yes, this is in what's called Area B. Area A is the portion of Israel that is accessible to the Arabs. Area C to the Israelis, and Area B is for both. In this area, it's under the civil control of the Palestinian Authority, but is under the military control of the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF. In order for a group not Arab to go in there, whether it's an Israeli group or visiting tourists, in order to go up to Mount Ebal, you must have prior permission of the IDF, and you must go with an IDF escort party. You cannot go there alone. You must be escorted in and out of this area. And that's why you were turned around. You may have had a guide with you, but if you didn't have the proper permissions and the proper military escort arranged in advance, then you don't get it. So even when Aaron Lipkin was going up there to get this material, they worked with a military escort every time. Every time I have been there to visit the site, it has been with a military escort. In some of the pictures that I gave you, you could see there, our military escort was also visiting the site while they were there.
Just if people go to Israel and they think they want to go see this site, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And also it's going to take a lot of time. So if we got itinerary, all trips have itinerary, that could be a good day. So there's just something to think about. I had acquaintances that made it up there. Let's see, one was Robert Mullins. I don't know if you're familiar, Bob Mullins. And he went up with at that time, it was his dissertation professor, Mazar.
So okay.
They went up there together.
Amichai, was it with Amichai Mazar?
Yes.
Yes.
So he told me a little bit about going up there. When this whole story broke, I tried to get up there, I couldn't. He goes, well, if I would say like I tried to get up there and couldn't, of course somebody's going to say, well, I did, we made it, And then he went up there with the well-known
you had
professor.
To do a lot of paperwork beforehand. Yes,
I bet. So anyway, kudos to getting up there. Now you went up there. How long were you up there? Did you go up several times or just one time? Did you go up with trucks, with some type of burlap bags to throw all the dirt in? It's got to be heavy. So obviously, so I'm asking a lot of questions all at once.
Yes.
Okay, you said that you were going to do. It's already been dry.
Okay, I personally went up there on a tour once when Aaron Lipkin took a group to transfer the material. He had to go with a guard. They went with a large truck, and they went with a bunch of people with shovels to shovel material into these 1 cubic meter bags. The bags then were lifted by a crane that's on the truck from the ground onto the truck, and then the truck was driven to the nearby village that we worked in. I don't know how many days they actually went up there working on it, because I was in Israel at the time, but I was down in Jerusalem working my job, and Aaron was taking care of the logistics to get this material moved over to the village where we were working. So I don't know whether it was one day that they were there or if it's several days. I do not know that part.
Okay. So did you go up to Mount Ebal and help extract the debris? Or were
During
you
the
at
time During the
go ahead.
time that we were working with this material, we actually ran out of the material that had been transferred. And so one day we did go back over there with a truck, with bags, with shovels, and we shoveled, a bunch more bags and put them onto the truck and brought them back to the village where we were working to bring a smaller second load. But the large first load that was brought over was done prior to the group arriving from the United States. Most of them came from the United States, a couple from Canada. But before the ABR group arrived in country, the material had already been transferred for them.
Oh, wow. So ABR didn't go up there. It was some other group from a local.
Aaron Lipkin found volunteers to go up there. He kind of supervised and arranged for that part to be done. Yes. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, that one day we went up as a group, the group that came from the United States, plus me coming from Jerusalem. We went to the site one day and transferred a little bit more material, but the majority had been transferred ahead of the project starting.
But you went up there the second time to help.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
You want to say I acquire some more dirt.
Right.
And then did you take it? What did you now I imagine you got a wet sifting station at Shiloh. Did you take your material to Shiloh then?
No, we took it to a village that is very close to Mount Ebal. I don't know that I'm allowed to say the name because in most programs Scott will just say a nearby Jewish village. So I don't know if they want that name disclosed or not. So I'm not going to say the name, but it was a Jewish village that is very close to Mount Ebal. And what we did is some of our techie people actually built a small wet sifting station where we could have two people working on it at the same time in order to do more sifting. We did not take the material down to Tel Shiloh because it's quite a distance to take it down there. And we didn't want the material from Mount Ebal being confused with material from Tel Shiloh. Because there we were already trying to keep three different groups straight. The material we had been digging and sifting at Tel Shiloh, plus the previous Danish dig and the previous Bar-Ilan dig. We already had to keep all those things separate. So we didn't want to confuse the materials. So it was done in a totally separate location.
All right. So the material was taken from Mount Ebal, at least the first time, when ABR's group wasn't there, and is transferred to this unknown Jewish settlement.
We're just going to unname it.
Yeah, that's an unnamed Jewish settlement. Okay, fine. Okay, since you were there and doing the wet sifting, how many wet sifting stations do you have? Like 3, 4, where you're sifting through it?
Yes. At Tel Shiloh, we have 8 that are set up, so we can actually have 16 people working at one time. For the Mount Ebal sifting, we only had one station where we could set up 2 trays, so we could have 2 people sifting. Also, we could take a tray, wash it off, and then give it to people to put over on a side table to work. So we could have a couple more people working on the side, but most of the time there were 2 of us at the wet sifting station working there, and then a few people on the side.
You have any pictures of the wet sifting stations so people got an idea? This is what I imagine. I imagine like a swing set, like you got posts, and where the swing is at, that's where you would hang the basket, and you might have a hose, inserted from the top, and you can turn it on, turn it off, or maybe a squeeze valve and spray it, and then then put it aside, then shake it, move it around with your hand. What exactly? How does a wet station look like? What does it look like?
Okay. The idea of this wet sifting tray hanging on a swing, this is what we use for dry sifting. For the wet sifting, we actually had it on top of a large square plastic drum, and then hoses going into it. There was a pump in the bottom of this drum, so as we use the water, we could pump it back out and keep reusing and recycling the water that we were using. But it was a spray hose. It's just a typical garden hose with a regular squirt nozzle on it. Yes.
Okay. But all this was going to take electricity, or if you're way out in the field, a generator. And if you got a generator, it's going to take gas.
Right.
So
This is why we were in a village where we had easy access to both water and to electricity. Because yes, when you need electricity for the pumps, and you need a water pipe, you need water coming from somewhere, and so we were able to use the water from the village. We had permission to use their water to do this. Like I said, we were recycling it. A lot of it got recycled, reused.
So what I imagine as the swing set with the hose, that's dry sifting.
Yes,
the wet sifting is over like a drum, and now I'm clear.
Okay.
I'm still old school, so I guess just the wet sifting. I mean, just the dry sifting as far as I've ever done.
Yeah, dry sifting is what was used for so many years, and actually, wet sifting was used quite a number of years ago, but on a very limited basis. And the first group to really use it on a constant basis was the Temple Mount Sifting Project. They really used the wet sifting as on a constant basis. Yeah.
I think it was used by Starkey in the 1930s.
Yes, it was.
And it was
at Telequiche.
Oh, see, there we go. See, don't study.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yes, it was a Telequiche. He did use it there.
Then, and he had an untimely death, but that's off the subject. I think after it kind of went the way and disappeared for a long, long time, that technique. But it was used all the way back in the 1930s. And yes, I'm sure it's a little, let's say if I was in a swimming pool, eventually, like anybody in your shower too long, your hands get so wrinkly and the skin gets soft. And so how do you prevent that from happening? Because
you put up with it for 8 hours.
You're doing this for 8 hours. I couldn't stand for 8 hours. Maybe a half an hour, and then
you're sitting down, standing up at times. But yes, we were doing this for 8 hours a day. Yeah, and you are working with water the whole time. I know some people tried using gloves. I found it totally impossible to use gloves because you don't have the feel of the material, and a lot of the materials you can tell what they are by the texture, and you do have to feel them with your fingers. Yes.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there because I handle a lot of artifacts for museums, and I can imagine if it was tossed with debris, that'd be extremely difficult. So here you are all day long, going through and running your hands across debris and looking for. I think the only thing that would keep me going is the excitement of the hunt.
It really is. You're looking for something, and on each tray you find artifacts. Now, what you look for is anything made by man or fashioned by man. So it may be pottery, it may be flint tools that is not made by man, but it's fashioned by man. You take a piece of flint and you make it into a tool. Things like coins or nails, ancient nails, beads, pendants, all kinds of things, any small artifact that would be hard to recognize in the digging process because it's covered over with lumps of clay or, it's covered over with dirt. But now once it's been sprayed off, it shows up there on the tray. And so this is what you're trying to do is you're trying to find anything made by man or fashioned by man. You don't go in with an agenda on, we want to find a curse tablet from the Mount of the Curses. You don't go in with that agenda. You go in with, is there anything that we can find from Mount Ebal that will help to corroborate Adam Zertal's suggestion that the area that he found is a later altar on top of the earlier altar that is recorded in Joshua 8:30 as the altar that was built by Joshua on Mount Ebal. So that's what we were doing, was just trying to find anything we could to corroborate his suggestion that this is the place that he had found.
Okay. So the debris is taken to the location that we don't know, and then you're going to fill up trays ahead of time for those that are going to take it, place it over a drum, hose it down, and sift through it. And all this is going to take time and probably a lot of cooperation. So there's a flow of things. It's kind of like a little, what do you call conveyor belt system. What do you want to say? Well, there's a method
System to doing it, because first we had to dry sift this material again, because when the material was taken, it's got lots of loose dirt in it again. So the first thing we would do is dry sift the material on something like you said, it's like a swing set with these sifters that are hanging from it. So material was dry sifted first, and then it was transferred into buckets of water to start soaking it. And then we take the material from the buckets and put it onto our trays, spray it with a garden hose, and start looking through it for anything that we could find that appeared to be an artifact. One of the most common things we were finding in there were flint tools. Because this was a sacrificial site, you needed a way to sacrifice the animal, and then animals were not put on the altar whole and entire. They were cut up into pieces. Certain pieces were sacrificed, other ones were not. And so you had a lot of flint tools up there that were used to first to sacrifice the animal, and then to portion the animal into pieces that would be put on the altar or not put on the altar. So there are quite a number of flint tools that we found there. We also found more pieces of pottery. Now, Adams O'Tall's group had been exceptionally diligent in their finding what we call diagnostic materials or indicative materials, meaning pieces of pottery that had such shapes that we could tell exactly what time period the pottery was from and what the piece of pottery was used for. These are pieces like that have the top rim showing, or the handle on it, or the base, maybe some kind of decoration on the side. His crew have been very diligent in finding indicative pottery. We found a few more pieces. We found a lot of pieces that were just broken pottery shards. But the flint tools are probably our biggest find up there. And then one day when I was working, I found this piece that looked like a pottery shard, because it's only this big, right? It's only this big. It looked like a piece of pottery shard. It was covered with dirt. And as I washed it off and I was feeling it, it's like, whoa, this is heavy. This has to be lead. This is not pottery. Pottery is a very lightweight. Lead probably weighs at least 5 times as much as a piece of pottery the same size. So in feeling, it was like, whoa, this is very heavy. I washed it off, and on the side of it, I could see that it was folded over like this. There was a top layer, a bottom layer, and I could see the seam line. Seam line went around 3 sides, and on the 4th side, I could see that it was rounded over and folded in half. So I could tell it had once been flat and then folded over. Now, I knew about lead tablets. Scott Stripling knew about lead tablets. Abigail Levitt, who was our assistant director up there, she knew about lead tablets. We knew the existence of lead tablets, typically called defixio. These were sometimes used by an individual who wanted to curse another individual, to curse my neighbor because he stole my sheep. So you'd have a scribe write this curse against your neighbor on the tablet. You would take the tablet, either fold it or roll it up, spirally roll it up. And generally, they were cast down inside of a well. That's the typical place to find these. In fact, a number of them were found at Caesarea in a well there, these curse tablets. But other times, tablets were used for other things, to record something about a document. on them. So we knew they existed. So when we found this and I saw that it was totally flat and I could see that it was folded over, I had the idea that it was some kind of a tablet. So I called over to Scott and I said, Scott, I've got something for you. And he's hollering back, what is it? You know, and I walked over there to him and I said, a lead tablet. Of course, he at the time about gasped of the heart attack because he knew all about these tablets. And like I said, we did not go to Mount Ebal, the Mount of the Curses, looking for a curse tablet, but it was like, oh my gosh, we have a lead tablet from Mount Ebal. Now, the problem was, how do you open it? How do you read it? Is there something written on the outside? Is there something written on the inside? How do we begin to research this? And the research is what took the next couple of years. Part of the problem with doing the research was, like I said, we did this dig at the very end of the last week in December of 2019 and the first few days of 2020. And of course, we all know what happened in 2020 was the COVID problem. So here now, the tablet is sitting in Israel, and we want to do testing on it. We want to do things with it, but the ABR crew had gone back to the United States at the time because of COVID. No one was allowed into the country, so Scott and the people on the crew could not come back into the country to do anything with this. So the tablet actually sat there in Israel for a while in a vault with the Antiquities Authority, and it took a little while to get the research done because of COVID. So that was a problem in the middle of it. One of the first things we were able to do was to send the tablet to a conservator. Her name is Orna Cohen, who lives in Jerusalem, and said, we want you to look at this and see, is it possible to open it? And she tried a little bit, and in the screen behind your head, to the upper left, you can see a tiny little spot in a corner there where it looks like it's broken off. This is where Orna attempted to open it a little bit. Says, let me see if we can even begin to open it. And all it did was crumble. So at this point, she said, there is no way to open this. If we attempt to open it, the whole thing is going to crumble and we will totally lose it. So what we need to do is figure out some way to read it without opening it. This tiny little crumble that fell off of the corner of it, that tiny little bit of material. I know in the picture it looks rather large, but actually it's very, very tiny bit of material. The material was sent to Hebrew University to Naama Hayalomak, who is a metallurgist there. And we asked her, here's some lead. We know it's lead. We can tell that much. Here's some lead. Can you tell us where it's from? Can you tell us anything about it? She was able to do testing on it and determined that the lead came from Lavrion, Greece. These were quarries that were used in Greece prior to the year 1200. The year 1200 becomes very important in this study. The year 1200 is the split between the earlier Bronze Age and the later Iron Age. Right around the year 1200, something happened, probably meteorological in nature, in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. There was a total collapse of all the city civilizations throughout the eastern Mediterranean, both in the Levant, which is Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon area, over into Turkey and Greece, and into North Africa. Something happened and all the cities literally collapsed, not fell down, but the city populations left there. Because there was no more population in the city, there was no more commerce going between the different countries or around within the countries also. Now, what happened? The two best guesses are there was a huge drought that lasted for quite a length of time, and people were no longer able to live in cities. People who live in cities are dependent upon farmers and hunters and fishermen who live out in the rural areas to bring their excess food into the city to sell. If suddenly these farmers don't have any excess food, there's no food going into the cities, and the people in the cities must leave and go back to being hunter-gatherers or fishermen. So these cities, the city populations just collapse in all these cities. Another possibility, other than a huge drought, may have been what's called a volcanic winter. This is when a volcano explodes any place around the world, and so much ash is forced up into the atmosphere that it literally forms this huge cloud that covers the world. The sun does not come through, it does not penetrate, so the land does not get as warm in the summer. And because of that cooler weather, the crops don't grow. So there may have been what was called a volcanic winter that happened. You may remember back at the time of Pinatubo, number of years ago when Pinatubo exploded in the Philippines, there was this cloud of ash that went totally around the world, and it did affect worldwide climate for a couple of years. So this may have been what happened. But right around this year, 1200, there was something that totally collapsed the Bronze Age civilization. And then when you moved in, when the civilization started to recover, this is now called the Iron Age. So there was something that happened right around that date. And what Dr. Mack told us was that the lead came from Lavrion, Greece, prior to 1200, because we have lots of instances of lead from Lavrion being used within the Levant prior to 1200, but not afterwards. So she said the lead came before 1200. The pottery that was found by Dr. Zertal, by Adam Zertal, that material, some of it was from the Iron Age, and there was some that came from this before 1200. He had also found 2 scarabs, and they dated from before 1200. So this 1200 becomes a very interesting date. So, okay, back to how do we research this tablet? We couldn't open it. We knew where the lead came from. So Scott began to look around the world to find someone who had done work with scanning lead. Now, how do you scan lead? When you think about going to the hospital to have an x-ray done, and they're going to x-ray your body, they put a lead shield over the rest of you not to damage it. So how do you scan through lead if this is what they use as a shield? Well, Scott found out there is a technique. It's called X-ray tomographic scanning. And he found out that there was an institute in the Czech Republic, I'll have to read, the name of it is rather long, the Institute of Theoretical and Applied Mechanics of the Czech Academy of Sciences. They had a campus in Prague and one in Telč in the Czech Republic, and they had experience in doing this tomographic scanning. Tomographic scanning is like an X-ray, like an MRI. With an MRI, you have layer after layer after layer, thousands of layers going through your body so that the doctors can see each tiny little level. Well, this is what this institute was doing with tomographic scanning of lead. They could take very, very thin layers of scans going through the tablet. And when they started looking at the images, suddenly on some of them, they started seeing little figures. And so they called in an expert in foreign languages and ancient foreign languages, and she identified the figures as being from what's called Proto-alphabetic script or Proto-Hebraic script. This is not the Paleo-Hebrew script that is used in the First Temple period in all different kinds of documents that have been found or in inscriptions. This is a very early script. And she identified some of the letters and recognized them. And she says, this looks like the Paleo-alphabetic or Paleo-Hebrew script. And once they had a complete list of, okay, here's the kind of letters we should be looking for if this is it, we had epigraphers who worked with us on this. The 2 epigraphers, let me go find where everybody is here. Gershon Galil out of Haifa University and Peter van der Veen out of University of Mainz were the people who began looking at these scans then. Now you have to remember when you do a scan, it is very, very thin and it's flat. And the inside of this and the outside of this tablet are not flat. So you're looking at letters that are on a curved surface. So when you look at one scan, you may see a letter or a part of a letter, but it's the scan below or the scan above that has the rest of the letter. So this is what confuses people when they look at some of the scans that we have published, especially one that has the letter Hey. It looks like a little man, a little stick figure man on it. And people say, well, I can see that, but I can't see any of the rest of the letters. Well, that's because they're not on that layer. They're on layers above. They're on layers below. So it took months of studying these scans and having to look at a layer and the layer above and the layer below to find the rest of the letter, because you may only see part of a letter on one scan. So it took a while. And eventually the epigraphers came up with 48 different letters that they thought they were seeing on there. Now, one of the problems with language at this time, especially the very early Hebrew, it didn't yet have directionality to it. When you look at ancient hieroglyphics and you're reading them, sometimes they read from the left to the right, sometimes they read from the right to the left, other times they read from the top down, and other times they read in something. There's a term that I always forget the name of. It means as the ox plows. So one letter will be read from the left to the right, the next one goes from the right to the left, then the left to the right, and it zigzags down this way. There was no set way of writing languages yet. So when they're looking at this scan now and they've found 48 different letters that they can sort of identify, it's like, okay, but how do we read it? It doesn't seem to go like this or like this or like this. What is it doing? But as they began to find clusters of letters that seem to form words, it almost goes in a spiral around like this, the way it was written. Now you have to remember that when the scribe wrote this tablet, it was never meant to be opened and read again. It was a tablet that was written once, sealed, and then placed wherever it was going to be placed. Like I said, sometimes we find these tablets at the bottom of wells, so it would be cast down a well. In this case, it was placed near this altar. So it was meant to be written, sealed, and never opened again. So here we were now, 3,000 years later, trying to figure out how to open this and read it. Can't open it. So how do we read it when it's closed? Never in his wildest imagination, I'll call him he, did this scribe ever think that someone would ever find this tablet, attempt to open it, and read it. What was important that he got the words onto the tablet, sealed it. That made it good. He never thought it would be reread, be read again. So he wasn't worried about trying to get, lines in any particular direction on there. So that's what part of the problem with analyzing, how is this tablet read? And other people will say, oh, we're not reading exactly like you are, but we see where you got the words, and we put the words in this order, where you put the words in that order. And we go, yeah, you're right. There's lots of different ways to do these. But with the reading that the epigraphers came up with, they were able to come up with something that made sense. And basically, like I said, it followed almost like in a spiral around it. They found these 48 letters, and they were able to put together some words. They found, surprisingly, the name of God, the divine name, Yud He Vav, written on it twice. They found to God, La'el, written on it once. They found the word cursed, Arur, Aleph, Resh, Vav, Resh, written on it 6 times. They found the word you twice, Aleph, Taf, He, Atah, you. And then the word will die in the future tense, Tamot. It's a Taf, Mem, Taf, written twice, and then just the word die by itself without the future tense on the beginning of it, Mem, Taf, Mot, written once. And the order that they put them in, I'll read them in the order that they they thought was the most logical, especially like because it was going around in a circle. You are cursed by the god, that is the La'el, that god, Yud He Vav, cursed. You will die cursed. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed are you by Yud He Vav, cursed. This reading is in what's called chiastic parallelism, where you have a statement, another statement that's written twice, and then the first statement repeated again. In literature classes, you learn this. Oh, it's in the form A, B, B, A. You have the first statement, you have the middle statement twice, and then the first statement on either end, or maybe A, B, C, B, A. 3 different statements. They go into the center and back out. So this is using chiastic parallelism, which was used at that time. The most surprising thing was to find the Yud He Vav in there, the name of the Israelite God. The nations that lived in that area didn't use this name of God. They were using Baal, they were using other names, but they were using this Yud He Vav name of God. And this Yud He Vav, you have a picture that you can attach that the Yud is a hand, because Yad, the Yud comes from Yad, so it's like a hand, which Yad means hand. So it looks like a hand. And then the He is a little stick figure man. And then the Vav is a straight line with a tiny little square box at the end of it. It's very surprising to find this, because this shows that whoever wrote this tablet worshiped this God. They did not worship the god Baal. Baal is not in there any place. They worshiped this God, and the generic name that they're using for God is El, like El and Elohim. Elohim being a plural form of the El. And then this Yud He Vav, and we don't know exactly how they're pronouncing it. In Hebrew, you don't pronounce it, but we actually don't know exactly how it is pronounced. Now, some people say, well, isn't the name of God usually written in 4 letters, the Yud He Vav He? We say, well, yeah, that is a form of it, but there is a 2-letter name of God, Yud He, that is used. In fact, Christians and Jews use it all the time. When you say hallelujah, actually you're saying 2 words. You're saying hallelujah, praise be to God. And that Yah is the Yud He, which is the 2-letter name of God. So it was very surprising to see this name of God in this document, meaning this came from the people that are now called, we go back and we say these were the Israelites, because this is the name that only the Israelites used for their God. So this is one of the biggest surprises with this. Also, the fact that this type of lettering is used, this proto-alphabetic or proto-Hebraic script is used, also tells us that this document was written before the year 1200. It was the much earlier language that was used. It was known, the language was known. One of the places that it was found was in the Sinai Peninsula. Petrie found some inscriptions there, and he said that he thought they were from around 1500 BCE. So this puts this document as a very early document. Right now, it is the earliest Hebrew document that has been found in Israel to date, which is very nice to say that I was able to find this one. But just the research, trying to get the research done and getting this information out to people took a while. I said because of COVID, we couldn't move around the country in order to get the document, to get this tablet over to the Czech Republic. Scott enlisted the help of Zvi Konigsberg, who was a person who actually worked with Adam Zotal. And he was the courier for us because Scott couldn't get into Israel. So Zvi was able to go from Israel into the Czech Republic and take the tablet there, along with the permission letter from the Antiquities Authority saying that it could leave the country and come back in. You had to do all that paperwork again in order for that to happen. But he was the courier for us to take the tablet back and forth to Prague to get the work done.
You mentioned the proto-alphabet found in the Sinai.
Yes.
You know that he was with his wife when he did that?
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So it's like a husband and wife team when they found that. And then there was another one that was found in the 1990s, so not that long ago. I believe it's the 1990s. And it was also found by a husband and wife team. And it's called the Wadi al Hole.
Okay.
And then I think the latest one, it was kind of like what you guys did, is that you excavated it years before you had it analyzed, right?
Right.
Well, this was it was an ivory comb found at Lachish.
Ah, yes, there we come. Mhm.
And it was also found in what is taught, a dump pile, but it was an ancient dump pile. It's where people were putting their debris
Garbage dump.
1700 years BC. So it was a 3,700-year-old dump pile.
These ancient
And it,
dumps are amazing. People say, why would you go through the garbage dump? You go, you find so much stuff at garbage dumps. They are some of the best places to dig is in garbage dumps.
and you're absolutely right because now the comb is made of ivory. It's actually made out of elephant tusks. So it came
Mhm.
from Egypt along the trade route. And it had on it that type of writing style, the
Right.
proto alphabet. This one, believe they said dates to around 1700 BC.
I'm not sure the
And
date. I know which one you're talking about, but I don't know the date on it.
I was just bringing it down. So they have the one that was found in the 1990s was the earliest because it looked more like the hieroglyphs of which they originated with.
Mhm.
And then they're suspecting the next one was the next group dates to probably maybe the 19th, 18th century BCE. And that was by Sir Flinders Petrie in 1906 in the
Mhm.
cyanide. And those were the turquoise mine. And then
Yes.
here lately is the comb, which dates to around 1700. So we got something from around 2000 BC, let's say
Yes.
that, to around 1800 BC to 1700. But now what's unique is actually an instruction, a sentence that was on a comb. So
Yes.
now, yeah, so, and that was actually, I believe it was peer reviewed by Dr. Christopher Rolston. Uh,
Right. Christopher Ellison. Yeah. Mhm.
So anyway, and so just to let people know that there is a history of finding these early form of alphabet,
Yes. Like
which
I
before
said, they
that,
they knew they knew what the alphabet was. It wasn't
right,
like they found a new language they had never seen before. It was they were able to identify the language.
right. So anyway, that's what I'm trying to say. It isn't
Mhm.
like they said, okay, what is this? This is alphabet. They already had known about an alphabet in existence, and
Mhm.
people are using it because the comb actually has a sentence on it. So now people are actually using it. And it was found in the land of Canaan, Tel Lachish. The whole thing is extremely fascinating because you got the complicated cuneiform of Akkadian, the West Semitic, and then you got the complicated form of hieroglyph in Egypt, and then you have a more simple form of writing that would be easier for people to use, which would be the proto alphabet.
Yes,
I had
this
this
had turned
discussion with
to a phonetic. It had gone from a pictorial system to a
yes,
phonetic system, and we know that by the time this tablet was written, it had moved into the phonics. And this is one of the reasons when we see the three-letter name of God, not the four-letter name, because we don't know how they're pronouncing it. We have an extra hey at the end, yud hey vav hey, but the hey at the end is sort of a well, if you're listening to somebody and writing down what they're saying, we're not quite sure how they were pronouncing the Yud Hey Vav, and it may have been that the at the end was so mixed with the ooh or the sound with it that it just wasn't recorded, and they recorded it as three letters instead of what we typically use now as a four-letter name.
right? Yeah, it'd be so much simplistic to use the proto alphabet in the place of complicated cuneiform and hieroglyph.
Yes.
And I was
It
joking with
simplified
a
things.
friend of mine,
Mhm.
um, and we were saying, well, they invented this alphabet. You think it would have just took off? But even when we get to the El Amarna letters, they were
Yes.
cuneiform, right? And there's a correspondence with those in Mesopotamia and those in the land of Canaan, the city states, to the Pharaoh in Egypt. And they're writing in cuneiform, the West Semitic language of the time, extremely complicated.
Mhm.
And maybe of course, the Egyptians are writing them back in the same way. I'm thinking, like, why didn't they all go to the alphabet system? What are they doing? These hard hands, um, right? Because since we found the Lachish tablet, they were we know in Canaan they were using the system of that early alphabet system, right? Makes sense.
Mhm.
Well, then it was in circular. If it's at Lachish, that's a city along a trade route, a very important
Yes.
trade route. Which to me, you think it would take off. It's just take off. Everybody say, "Hey, wait a minute. Let's get into this uniform system. Maybe it's like us. We use inches and feet, and overseas it's meters. And you think we'd all get
Everybody in the
together
world uses meters except for us, and I cannot figure out
separate?
why we don't use meters. In archaeological reports, when I gave you the dimension of this, I gave it to you in centimeters and millimeters. That's because
Right,
in archaeology, everything is done in the metric system. We don't use the inches and feet at all. The metric system is so much easier to use.
right. So really, the whole thing would be a really neat progression
Mhm.
from the Wadi Hole to the Sinai to the Lachish, and then of course the tablets you found in Mount Ebal
Mhm.
in that type of succession from earlier stage to, you could say, this more recent discovery.
Yes.
Um, and who knows what else is out there. But yeah, it is rather fantastic. Um, I've heard it said um, that there was no system of writing. Well, I should say there are systems of writing, but it'd be hugely complicated. So what was the system of writing for the Canaanites? Well, we have the Akkadian, but we also have now there is that proto-alphabet system. I think the at least the one in Lachish makes that obviously clear at this time. And now we're waiting for more results from the tablet to come in as well. So this is terrible. This is more like, okay, let's wait.
It
That's
does
got to
it
be
does show the development of language. And I
well, it
will
does
say there was another inscription that was found in the city of David by Eli Shurkerin. It's in the area that is to the east of the eastern wall of the city of David, going down into the Kidron Valley. And they had found there on a stone something else that was about somebody being cursed. And it's written in this same kind of text, I mean, these same kind of letters. He had found it, I think it was in 2010. I'm not quite sure the year. He found it, before we found this one in 2019. He had found it before that, but they hadn't been able to find anything else that looked like it. And so they didn't know what to do with it. And then when our publications came out about the Mount Ebal Curse Tablet, they realized that that inscription is very similar to this one. It has the same type of letters. It has that Proto-Hebraic script, the Proto-alphabetic script on it. And it again has the Arur, curse be somebody for something, that type of language in it. And so that one is being studied parallel to this text because of the similarity in the use of the letters and in the use of certain words that are on it. And his is on a larger piece of stone that has the inscription on it. So that one's
well,
in the works also. Yeah.
right. Well, what a progress of events from just going to sift dirt from a site uh, to this whole episode in your
Yes.
life has to be rather exciting. And it must be challenging for you too, because it's not just wait for those that are, we're waiting for the peer review to come out, and then of course more, I guess, from what I understand, also they're going to show us more scans of the outer surface of the
Yes,
structure as well.
there are scans for people who are looking at the pictures of the curse tablet that have been coming up on the screen. There are letters on the outside also. And so they're working now on what other letters that are there. I'm sitting here looking at it. I can see an aleph down in one corner. Okay. There are letters on the outside, so they will be publishing that also. Initially, they just worked on publishing the inside. Once they realized the letters on the outside, the article was already 50 pages long to publish the inside, and people aren't going to sit there and read a 100-page article. So it's the article with the publication of the outside will be coming out later on. It's been in the process of being written.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to say before we leave? I'm thinking that it would be okay. Let me ask you this:
Yes.
would there be some question that we haven't looked at yet that you would like to talk about?
One of the things is the importance of this tablet. What is important about finding it? Like I said, it is the oldest Hebrew inscription that's been found to date in Israel. Now, it may be rivaled by that one down in the city of David that they think maybe 100 years older or something. They're working on that one. The importance is that it contains God's name, the Yud He Vav that was used specifically by the Israelites. So it shows us that the Israelites were actually there in the land of Israel sometime prior to this 1200. It indicates the literacy, as you were talking about the language and developing the language. It shows that Hebrew at that time was a phonetic language, not just pictographic. It certainly adds substance to Zertal's claim that this structure that he found on Mount Ebal just might be Joshua's altar of Joshua 8:30. And one of the things that it does, sadly, it debunks the documentary hypothesis. With the documentary hypothesis, the idea is that there are 4 different voices within the text. I can see that. They're divided up into the J text, meaning Jehovah, which is the German form of the Yud He Vav. There are the E text, the El and Elohim text. There are the D text, the Deuteronomistic history, meaning Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, and then the priestly text, the P text. Well, the idea initially with the documentary hypothesis was there was this whole development of God being called by the name Yud He Vav, however we want to try to pronounce that, the J text. And there are all these texts that contain the name of God using the E name, the El or Elohim. And with the hypothesis, generally it's considered that the J texts come out of the 9th or 10th century BCE, and the Elohim texts come out of the 9th century BCE. Well, here we have in this document, we have the J name of God and we have the E name of God, the El and the Yud He Vav, side by side in a text that dates prior to 1200. So it's back in the 13th century BCE. So it is really a challenge to the dates given in the documentary hypothesis. I mean, hypothesis is an argument that can either be refuted or it can be substantiated. And now what we're doing is we're refuting one of the main parts of the documentary hypothesis, which is how these names were brought together, or if they were brought together, or if they were already together in the very beginning when they were used. So it has been a challenge to the documentary hypothesis, and a lot of religious scholars, not just the archaeological scholars who have said, wait a minute, what did you guys find? Is this real? We also have the religious scholars or those who study the text who are saying, wait a minute, they may be onto something here. So it's been a challenge to that part of the academic community also.
Right. So, um, of course, we'll be adding the pictures that you sent us.
Yes.
And if people want to learn more about the tablet, there's all kinds of information on the web right now.
Yes.
Also, you had the peer review article that's
Peer review
accessed.
article. If they
Yeah.
simply, if they Google Mount Ebal Curse Tablet, they will find the peer review article on there. The scientific article is right there on the internet. It's available for them to see, along with lots of different people's opinions. Like I said, other people are saying, well, I'd read it this way and I'd read it that way. And we go, hey, have at it. Because we're not sure how to read this because it's not written in straight, very straight lines. And, basically people are working with the same words, but in this translation that we use, all the letters are accounted for. They're used once and only once within a word. We're not using the same letter twice. Um, and it's a logical statement, a logical statement to be written there in the tablet. This was a way of these people confirming the covenant that had been given to the Israelites by God on Mount Sinai. On Mount Sinai, we have an earlier generation who agreed to God's covenant, that they would be God's people. And now here in Israel, this is 40 years later, it's a different population. These are the children and the grandchildren of the original people who said, yes, we accept this covenant. And now we have this new group of people who are going in, the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren of those who actually left Egypt. And they're saying, we are renewing the covenant that God gave to our fathers, our grandfathers 40 years ago. We are now agreeing to this covenant. And one way to agree to the covenant is to write something about the covenant on a tablet, sign it, seal it, put it there on the altar. And this is them saying, we agree to this covenant that our ancestors signed. Now we are signing it and agreeing to it. And the main part is, if we keep the covenant, we will be blessed by God. If we don't keep the covenant, we are going to be cursed by God. And our God's name is Yud-Heh-Vav.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Hopefully,
Yes.
I'm not putting you on the spot. Okay, for the listening audience that wants to find in the Hebrew scripture, in the our Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, where does this take place? In Deuteronomies and in Joshua?
Okay. The original story starts with in Deuteronomy 27 and 28. Moses is telling to the people, to the Israelites, when you arrive in the land, you are going to go to these two mountains. It's Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. They're next to each other. Actually, the city of Shechem is down in the middle. Half of you are going to stand on one mountain, half of you are going to stand on the other mountain. The priests are going to announce the blessings that will be given if you hold to the covenant. The people on Mount Gerizim are going to answer, Amen. Then they're going to announce curses, and the people on Mount Ebal are going to say Amen to the curses. And so it was this back and forth agreement. Here are some blessings, Amen. Here are some curses, Amen. Here are some blessings, Amen. Here are some curses, Amen. He says, and then you're going to build an altar there at that site. Then in the book of Joshua, in Joshua chapter 8, we hear, and when the Israelites got to the land of Israel, they went to these two mountains, and 6 tribes stood on Mount Ebal, and 6 tribes stood on Mount Gerizim, and they answered each other back and forth, Amen and Amen, to the blessings and the curses that were being read by the Kohanim, by the priests who were down in the valley. And then it says, and then Joshua built an altar there on Mount Ebal, and that is Joshua 8:30. So here's where the stories are. And it was when Zertal found this huge pile of rocks during his survey of the Manasseh region, and he began to remove the rocks and found below it this rectangular altar. And then inside the altar, the little round altar, Zertal was not an archaeologist who went around, as we say, with the Bible in one hand and the shovel in the other hand. It was after he found it that people started saying to him, wait a minute, is this what you found up there? And they showed him all the scriptures, and he began to read it and going, whoa, maybe this is what I found. He didn't go to the mountain to find the altar. He found the altar, then said, wait a minute, there's scriptures here that talk about a mountain, Mount Ebal. It talks about an altar there. And this is sort of the relative time period. And this is the relative time period I'm finding. And that's when he realized this was probably what he had found. But like I said, he was not one that went around looking for it. He wasn't looking for the altar. They were just doing a survey of the Manasseh region, looking for anything they could find. And what they found was the altar, and they found all these things. They found, all the pottery and the scarabs and the things there. And then when we went back, we found the tablets. And we kind of say it might have been a good thing that we found the tablet then. It wasn't found earlier during the first excavations, because when that first excavation was being done, there was no such thing as tomographic scanning of tomography. That didn't exist. And we keep thinking, oh my goodness, if somebody had found this earlier and they tried opening the tablet and it all crumbled, we would have lost it. Where here, the tablet was found at a perfect time where the technology existed that we could actually go in and read it without opening it.
Okay. So for our listening audience, we got all kinds of material that you can actually go to for the Mount Ebal peer review that can be accessed on the web. For information about the location of the altar and the ceremony itself, that can be located in the scriptural narrative, Hebrew Bible, or the equivalent in Christianity, the Old Testament. Also, I'll add one more thing. The excavator himself, Adam Zertal, he wrote a number of books before he passed away, where he is in the book where he's talking about the altar and discovering it. It is called A Nation Born, A Nation Born. So
Yes.
Here's all kinds of resources for people if you're interested. I did, because I went and got the book. Of course, I looked all this stuff up.
I have this on my shelf over here.
All right, so anyway, I said, well, Scott Stripling went to class with me at Trinity Southwest University. So I said, well, I got the book, A Nation Born. I read their peer review article. Of course, I read the Old Testament. I know Scott Stripling from being in the classroom. The only person I don't have on my agenda right now is Frankie Snyder. So here you are. We're out of time, but I thank you for this very detailed process that you went through of explaining the beginning of the involvement of going to Mount Ebal, and how you got involved because you were known also from the Mount Sifting program, where you, I guess, became in contact with associates of biblical research. And then I imagine Dr. Stripling, you were invited to go to the Mount Ebal Sifting program. I guess I'll call it the Sifting program at an unknown location. And there, years later, when you had the opportunity, it was taken to, was it the Czech Republic, to be scanned using a technique called tomography, kind of like CT scanning. After being examined by the scanners, and you had a number of slides or scans, it was read by epigraphers such as Gershon Gail and Peter Van der Veen. Okay. So
this was a multi-nation project. We had the main team that was coming from the United States, some from Canada. We were working in Israel. We sent the material to the Czech Republic. We were all over the place trying to figure out, where it came from. Material came from Greece. So this is a multinational project in order to do the research on this tablet.
It does sound intense. It really does. And I appreciate your time and coming to our program on Bible Interact and sharing this with us. So we got this on record, exactly how this early stage came about. Thank you very much, Frankie, for your time. And don't go away, but I got to pause the program and end it. So this is
Thank you for the
Biblical
invitation to
Archaeology.
come.
Thank you very much. So Biblical Archaeology
Thank you.
from the ground down, sponsored by Bible Interact. Like and subscribe. Thank you very much for your time. Everybody have a great day.